Okay, so this is the Presidential Library, and it is the first presidential library ever established, and actually it was FDR's idea to create a presidential library. He knew previous presidents' papers had been lost over time. So he got his mother to give this piece of the property to the government in 1939, and again he helped to design the building. He wanted it to look like the Dutch colonial architecture in the Hudson Valley, so you'd see it has the gabled roofs. And the exterior stone walls, he liked buildings to blend in with their surroundings, so those stones were pulled from local fields. As I say, he opened it in '41 and he used it while he was president. You can still see his office in there, and he delivered 2 of his fireside chats from this building. So, and it's been renovated recently, so there's lots of really good interactive exhibits, lots of things to see in there. So if you have a chance, I really recommend going on in. One of the wonderful exhibits is his car, the 1936 Ford Phaeton that he used to drive all around the county in. It has the hand controls, and he loved technology, so it actually has a high-tech feature. It has a cigarette dispenser that lights the cigarettes on the way out. So you don't see that. So he had his priorities. So, as I said, I just want to tell you really quickly, and I promise this will be a quick version, so I will make it very fast, his political career, and then we'll get on over to the gravesite. 1910, he was elected to the state senate from this district. 1912, he was re-elected. He didn't serve that second term. At that point, he was appointed Assistant Secretary of the Navy by Woodrow Wilson, and served in that position during World War I. Then, in 1920, he ran as a vice presidential candidate, and they lost. The Democrats had a bad year that year, but then 1921, when he was trying to figure out what his next move in politics should be, he was stricken with polio that summer. At that point, he's 39 years old. Lost the use of his legs, so took about 7 years off in public life trying to find treatments that would help him to walk again. This was during the time, during this period, he actually found the old resort down at Warm Springs, Georgia that had hot mineral springs, and he actually bought the place, converted it to a polio rehab facility, hired doctors and therapists to come up with treatments for polio victims, and actually opened it to the public. If you had polio, you could go there, receive treatments, and if you couldn't afford to pay, he'd actually pay for your treatments. This was also the time where he started the March of Dimes, which was to raise money for the research for the vaccine. So that's, of course, why you see his face on the dime. And then 1928, he was actually brought back to politics to support the Democratic ticket by running for New York State governor. So he served 2 terms in New York as governor, and then in 1932 he was elected for the first of his 4 terms as president. Now, of course, the first couple of terms were devoted to getting the country out of the Great Depression. So he started programs to put people back to work, like the Works Progress Administration, Civilian Conservation Corps, and also, of course, started Social Security and unemployment. He wanted people to have a sense that we're all in this together and to give people that sense of stability again. And he tried to regulate the stock markets and the banks with the FDIC and the SEC. But at the same time, he's actually aware of what's going on in Europe. He's fluent in French and German, so he's actually able to read Mein Kampf in the original unabridged German version. So he knew very early on what Hitler's real agenda was. So he started working with Churchill to help Britain. And then in 1941, he got the Lend-Lease Act passed so we could send supplies to Britain. Then, of course, December 7th of 1941 with Pearl Harbor, were fully involved in the war. And he continues to work with Churchill during the war years. And he and Churchill became very good friends. Actually, Churchill visited this house 4 times during the war. And Franklin was actually working on the United Nations as the war was winding down in Europe in the spring of 1945. He actually thought that would be the way to prevent future wars. So he was down at Warm Springs in April of 1945. And he was working on a speech he planned to deliver to the San Francisco Conference of the United Nations when in the early afternoon hours of April 12th he was stricken with a cerebral hemorrhage. Passed away a couple of hours later. But because he had asked to be buried up here in his mother's rose garden, there was a funeral train, much like Lincoln's. They brought him up, they made a stop in Washington, and then up along the river, the tracks are